Good morning, everyone. This is a quick video to go over a few things that people seem to struggle with for the last grammar quiz. What I did was went through the statistics of the test to figure out the questions that most people missed, and I was just going to go over those real quick so you can see if these cover some of the ones you missed. Here's the first one. The original sentence is, she wanted to make cookies that afternoon, however, she spent 3 hours working on creating a final exam instead. This passage contains a comma splice. This is the correct answer. And the comma splice is right here. And I'll tell you why. She wanted to make cookies that afternoon is a complete sentence. It's an independent clause. She spent 3 hours working on creating a final exam instead is also a complete sentence. It could stand on its own. It's also an independent clause. Anytime you have a complete sentence on one side and a complete sentence on the other and a comma in the middle, you are creating a comma splice, even if you have that word however in it. If you have that word however, you bracket it with a semicolon on one side and a comma on the other. So here's the rule. When you're using the word however, check and see if you've got complete sentence on one side, complete sentence on the other, or independent clause on one side, independent clause on the other. If you do, then you need a semicolon and a comma. This whole set, semicolon, however, comma, semicolon, however, comma, semicolon, however, comma, all of that goes together as one unit. That is only when both sides of the however are complete sentences, or in this case, independent clauses. Remember, complete sentence is the same thing as an independent clause. Same thing. Okay, next one. Okay, here is the sentence. Beauty brings copies of itself into being, comma, quote, states Elaine Scarry, period. Quote, it makes us draw it, comma, take pictures of it, comma, or describe it to other people, period, end quote. The last answer here is correct, and I'll tell you why. This quote, beauty brings its copies of itself into being, that is a complete sentence. That could stand on its own. You could put it in the frame sentence. They did not understand the idea that beauty brings copies of itself into being. That's one way to test. You can test by turning it into a question. You can do all of the tests on that and see that it's a complete sentence. So after you have this states Elaine Scarry, you have to have a period because you're saying that all of this is a complete sentence. If you don't have a period there, you're either creating a comma splice or a fused sentence. The rest of it is self-explanatory. It's a list of items, makes us draw, takes photographs, describe it to other people. You have those commas in between the list of items. That's the next one. By the way, you might hear chickens in the background. I'm sitting outside. Okay, here, speaking of chickens, this is a big, long sentence, and it's a good way of remembering that even when you have a big, long sentence, it's not necessarily a fused sentence unless the punctuation is incorrect. So, the second answer is correct. As part of their Sunday chores, comma. You have a comma there because as part of their Sunday chores is an introductory clause or phrase. You would naturally pause there. As part of their Sunday chores, comma, I asked the boys to hang lights in the front yard, comma, take out all of the trash in the house, comma, vacuum the stairs, comma, and feed the chickens. That section about I asked them to do all of this stuff, each one of those items is kind of long and involved, but it doesn't matter because it's still punctuated correctly. After feed the chickens, that's where the sentence ends. It's as if I'm saying, as part of their Sunday chores, comma, I asked the boys to do this, this, and this, period. That's where the sentence ends, so that's where I'm putting the semicolon. When I checked 2 hours later, comma, again, because that's an introductory clause, when I checked 2 hours later, comma, they had not even started, period. Introductory clause and phrases, remember sometimes this can be as simple as the word first, as in first comma, I mowed the lawn. Or it can be a much longer phrase, but you need to check and make sure that you don't need a comma. Often when you start with the word when or after or because or any of those types of words, then you'll have a comma after the introductory phrase. There's that one. Next we have the Smiths. First of all, you should always remember that you put a comma after the place names. Even if it doesn't sound like you would pause in the sentence, you still put a comma after place names. So El Paso, comma, Texas, comma. That's going to be a given no matter where it is in the sentence. Here we have, the Smiths used to live in El Paso, comma, Texas, comma, a border town with this thing, and this thing. And all of those things, since they're in a list, each one of them gets a comma afterwards. So it's the Smiths used to live in El Paso, comma, Texas, comma, a border town with excitement, comma, opportunity, comma, and flair. Now, the Smiths is just plural. The Smiths are not owning anything. They don't possess anything in this sentence, and that's why there's no apostrophe. When you see that apostrophe in there, what it's telling you is that whoever has the apostrophe also owns something else in the sentence. Here, after the divorce, comma, she wanted to move to Florida with her father, comma, but her mother refused to allow it, period, claiming the spring break atmosphere would be a bad influence on her little girl, period. The passage contains a sentence fragment. The first sentence is perfectly fine, perfectly punctuated. After the divorce, remember I said sometimes when you use the word after at the beginning of the sentence, that's a clue that you're going to have an introductory clause or phrase, and you need to put a comma somewhere afterwards. That's that comma after an introductory clause or phrase. After the divorce, comma. She wanted to move to Florida with her father, comma, but her mother refused to allow it. This comma is here because she wanted to move to Florida with her father is a complete sentence, and her mother refused to allow it is a complete sentence. And this comma, but, comma, and coordinating conjunction, that's how you join two complete sentences with a comma and a fanboy, or comma and a coordinating conjunction. So everything about that first sentence is correct. Let's look at the next sentence. Claiming the spring break atmosphere would be a bad influence on her little girl. That only makes sense if it's connected to the sentence before it. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense at all. You can't say, if you put it into a frame sentence, it doesn't make sense to say, they didn't understand the idea that claiming the spring break atmosphere would be a bad influence on her little girl. You can't turn it into a question. Is claiming the spring break atmosphere would be a bad influence on her little girl? Neither one of those things makes sense. Therefore, we know it is not a complete sentence. It doesn't complete an idea or thought. This word claiming is called a gerund. It has that ing on the end, and that's what happens when you take a verb and you turn it into an ing word, and it is never a verb in a sentence. This is a tremendous red flag. Anytime you begin a sentence with an ing word, you better be really sure that somewhere in there you have a comma and you complete the sentence. For example, you could fix this by saying, refuse to allow it, period. She claimed the spring break atmosphere would be a bad influence on her little girl. Or you could keep the period there and you could say, claiming the spring break atmosphere would be a bad influence on her little girl, comma, her mother told her she couldn't go. And that her mother told her she couldn't go, that would be the part that completed the sentence. So again, be very careful when you begin a sentence with an ing verb. On to the next one. This one was kind of a tricky one because you kind of have to know the Roosevelt quote, but I'm not sure that anybody doesn't know that quote. There's the quote, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." When Roosevelt said that quote, he was not asking a question. When you put a question inside the quotation marks, you are saying that whoever said that was actually asking the question. He didn't say, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." He said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." So when he says it, it needs to be a sentence, and then the um, the question mark goes on the outside of the question that you're asking. That one was kind of a tricky one. But good job if you got it right. I think a couple of you did. And that's it. I hope that helps. If there were questions that you had, you can go back and look at your quizzes now and see what you got incorrectly and what the correct answers are. And if there's anything that you would like me to go over specifically with you, all you need to do is take a screenshot of the question and answer from D2L and send it to me in an email. And I'll respond and we can talk about why it's wrong or what the correct answer is.